Welcome to the Spectrum Lounge podcast, where we discuss creatives of color disrupting the game in TV, film, and pop culture. I am your host, Rebecca Theodore-Vachon, and on this episode, I am joined by Jerry L. Barrow to review the 40-year-old version, starring, written, and directed by Rodda Blank. Take a listen. Welcome back to the Spectrum Lounge, Jerry Barrow. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me back. It feels like it's been a while. I can't
It
remember
has.
the
Well,
last
you're
time I've
you're
been here.
you're off in your podcasting world. You have your own podcast, so.
Oh, this is true. This is true. And let me tell you, I don't know how you've done this for so long because
Ah!
it's a lot of work when you are
Mhm.
just your own booker, your own
Mhm.
producer, your own editor,
It's a
your own
lot.
interviewer. I'm just like, oh
Doing
my
the
God.
research. Yep.
Doing the research for the preparations for the interviews, and then you got to do the promotion of the interview once it's live and
Yes.
across multiple platforms, and setting up the feeds, making sure, oh wait, you know how many times I've scheduled it for the wrong time? Like, I usually schedule it for 1 a.m. and I've scheduled it for 11 p.m. the next day. So many. I wake up in the morning like, yo, how come my feed hasn't populated yet? Why is it still private?
I told you.
Oh, dummy, you put the wrong time in.
It's a pain.
So,
It is a pain.
yeah,
It's a lot of work. Podcasting is work, but you gotta love it in order to do it. That's I
I
definitely.
do, and I
Yeah.
do love mine. I love
Mhm.
my I've gotten so much great feedback
Oh,
on
that's
the
good.
Fathers Who Bother. So that's what keeps me going, honestly, is when people text me saying, "Yo, that episode, man.
Mhm.
Yo, I didn't." So I have a lot of fathers and non-fathers hitting me up, just really grateful and thankful that I'm doing it. So that's what
Awesome.
I mean. That's what keeps me going.
So we on this episode of the Spectrum Lounge, we will be reviewing the new Netflix film, The 40-Year-Old Version. That's
Yeah.
Version, not the Steve Carell movie. It will be releasing on Netflix Friday, October 9th. Um, and I'm so excited about this movie. I know that 40-Year-Old Version premiered at Netflix, at Sundance, excuse me. And it got a lot of critical praise. And so I'm really, really was excited to see this movie. And so the movie stars and is written and directed by Radha Blank. And I just love this movie. I was just like, I have to have Jerry on because, we're both 70s babies. Um,
Yeah.
and in our 40s, and we're both BK babies as well. So I was
Yeah.
like, I can't really think of anybody else I could do this podcast with other than you. I mean, I love my other critic friends, but I was just like, a lot of them are New York transplants. And I'm like, no,
Mm.
you got to be born here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, where were you born? Brooklyn, Cumberland, Brookdale. What are the major hospitals in Brooklyn? I'm trying to
Oh
think.
yeah, well, it's Kings County, which is where I was born,
Same.
and then Brooklyn, then downstate, and
Oh, downstate. Yeah.
downstate Medical Center, and then Brooklyn Hospital, and
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. So I'm a Kings County baby, and I love Rodda. I love this movie, and I can't wait for us to get into it.
Yeah. So basically, a quick synopsis: 40-year-old version follows Radha. Her actual character's name is Radha as well. She is a playwright, and it seems that she was on the rise. She was on a list of 30 under 30 of promising playwrights, and then it sort of became a dream deferred. So when we meet her in the movie, she is approaching 40, and basically all the promise and the expectations, her career basically has not gone the way that she expected. She is teaching playwriting to a group of high school kids, hasn't really produced anything in, I think, close to a decade. And so she basically decides, to take this other or this new creative route by becoming a rapper. And that's hilarious in itself. But yeah, I just wanted, just off the cuff, what did you think of the movie? What were your first impression? What your first
I
impression?
l- I really liked it. I was biased from the jump,
Mm-hmm.
just to be honest. Full disclosure. So I'm watching the screener. I mean, I saw the trailer, And I said, "Okay, I need to see this movie," because when she was rapping in the trailer about what it was like being 40, even though she was speaking from a woman's perspective, I still related to a lot of what she was saying. It's like, why are they sending me AARP stuff in the mail? Like, why is my body betraying me? You know? And then I actually started watching it, and I saw one of my good friends, Guy Routet, is was the music director, and I was like, oh, I now I'm really gonna get into this because Guy is Pharoah Monch's manager and
Oh, wow.
huge hip hop head, and he was an artist himself back in the '80s, and so he just had all this experience, and this was his first, um, you know, time working on a film,
Mhm.
and so I was just plugged in from the musical perspective, but just from a plot point, I felt Radha so much because I've never been on any 30 under 30s or 40 under 40s, but when I was a kid, I was given that gifted and talented label,
Yeah.
and anybody that's had that put on them, you feel this immense pressure that like your life should be a certain way by the time you get to a certain age. Like they put all this expectation on you. Well, you're the best and the brightest. It's kind of like the whole talented 10 thing.
Yes.
And you feel like you get to 30, 35, and you're just like, well, shoot, how come I'm not a VP of something by now? How come I'm looking at my peers and I'm like, they've got titles higher than me? And I'm like, well, what am I doing wrong? Like I did have the EIC title once upon a time, but that was a long time ago now. So it's like, what you doing now, Hammer?
Mhm.
So I really related to what Rodda was going through. But then it was just a fun movie. Like she's hilarious and relatable. The opening, I don't know how much we're gonna spoil. Is this gonna be spoiler free or not? But
Yes,
I
we'll
just
we'll
had a
put
lot of fun with it. And it
yeah, go
had
ahead.
yeah, yeah, she shot it in black and white, so it had kind of like the Hollywood shuffle feel. And then she's doing the similar critiques of instead of it being Hollywood, it's theater. And I've been to some plays and had some insight into how that whole world works. It's not that much different from Hollywood.
Mm.
And I'm watching it and I'm thinking about the Tupac play that they did a couple years back, the Holla If You Hear Me,
Oh my god, I
and
remember that.
Saul Williams. I think I took you to see that with me.
Yeah, we went to
And
see it together.
and they had, Saul Williams was the lead, and I didn't find out till recently that that was supposed to have been Chadwick Boseman.
What?
But he
Oh,
was
wow.
supposed to have been Chadwick Boseman, but he got a I think I want to say it was 42, and it ended up doing the movie instead of doing the play. So I'm just my worlds just collided with this movie because I'm a huge hip hop head, but I've been focused more on film and TV for the last 4 years.
Mm.
But here was my opportunity to have both of my worlds collide, and it was and Radha's amazing. I got to talk to her last week, and we just felt a kindred spirit because I was calling out some of the cameos that you'll see in the film, and she was like, I'm so glad that you said that because even though we did well at Sundance, I was reading these reviews and no one caught the cameos. No one
Mm.
got excited about who the bus driver was. No one got excited about who the guy on the train selling oils was. And she was like, but I made it for us to get excited, because she went to Murray Bergstrom High School, which is the same high school that Q-Tip and a lot of rappers, New York rappers, went to Murray Bergstrom. So it all made sense, and Rod is definitely of us.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize that I knew of her 'cause she did this really hilarious parody. I keep calling it a parody, but it's like she did a remix of Big Daddy Kane's "Ain't No Half Steppin'" called "Hotep's Hoteppin'," where she's just basically she's basically taking the task all what we call the ashy types that are telling women how they're supposed to how their bodies are supposed to operate and all this other crazy pseudoscience that they but she's spin she's got bars like the thing with Radha too is like she's rapping but it's not really she's not whack. It's not like she's forced.
Yes.
And she's reminding you that just because you're over a certain age doesn't mean you don't have talent, doesn't mean you don't have skills. And I think if anything, at this age, you have more to rap about.
Mhm.
You have, I mean, a lot of rappers say, their debut albums are their best because they put their entire lifetime into that debut album. They put their 20 years worth of experience into that album. So by the time their second or third one comes around, it's like, okay, what am I rap about now? But she's coming from this perspective of a woman who's lived life and it's like, you know what? It's not all, peaches and cream, roses, however. So I just found her really relatable and funny, and the cast she put together is a lot of fun. Um, but I feel like I'm rambling, so I'm gonna let you chime in here.
Oh no. No, it was watching that movie, it was like um movies that star Black women, whether it's TV shows or films, I always feel like I see some aspect of myself in a lot of these characters, whether it's, Olivia Pope or Annalise Keating, or, you know what I mean? Like I will, for me, I think a couple of days ago, someone was asking what TV character do you remember seeing yourself most in? And I was like, when I was a kid, I saw myself in Tootie in from Facts of Life. That was the first time that I felt like, oh wow, look at this brown
Hmm.
skinned little girl. And I was, and she had like the bangs, like her bang game was ridiculous. Everybody's trying to get the Tootie bang, and
Right,
I could not get it right. And then
right.
when I was in my 20s, I saw myself in Nia Long in Love Jones. um that was just like Nina
Mm.
Mosley. And well, you knew me back then. It was just sort of like people were like, oh, you look
Oh
like
yeah, I remember.
yeah, and I just I've styled my hair like her. A lot of the outfits that she wore in Love Jones, and even stuff she was wearing in Soul Food. Like I was a huge Nia Long fanatic. But now, if you ask me now which character I see, I would definitely say Rodda in 40-year-old version. Like I felt so seen in this movie, so seen. I mean, I don't think I'm as witty or funny as Radha, but just so many things that she talked, that what you mentioned, things that she was talking about when you turn woman, when you turn 40, particularly with a woman's body. They don't tell you. They don't warn you about that shit. Like they only tell you about menopause, right? They're like, oh, menopause, it hits you in your 50s, and then, you got to look forward to heat flashes and, vaginal dryness and, a dip in your, lower sex drive, like just all these negative things. And I was like, oh my God. And let's not talk about when you find that first gray hair in your pubic hair. Let's talk about that. Like, I remember when I saw it, when I found I think it was a few years ago, and I freaked the fuck out. I was like, what is that? I thought it was, what did I think it was? I just thought it was like a piece of string or something. And it was like, oh no, this is actually mine. And it was like, and I was like, I could live with gray hair. I'd seen a couple of gray hairs at my temple, and I was like, okay, I can live with that because I can dye
Mm,
it. But for
right.
me, like the gray pubic hair, that was for me like,
The old bushes,
yes,
the
it
death
was like,
knell.
yeah, it's like you're officially old, even down there. You know what I mean? It was like, oh fuck. So these are the things that they don't tell you about. And with 40-year-old version, I love that Radha just talks about these things in this very, but it's not traumatic, and it's not sad. You know what I mean? Like
No,
it's not
she's self-deprecating at times, but she's
very,
definitely not,
yes,
downtrodden. Like she's actually fighting against that, with the whole,
yes,
anti-poverty porn thing that she gets on with when it comes to the plays. Like she lives a really good, interesting and full life.
yeah,
But,
yeah,
she has a moment, she has a bad day, she's in mourning, in the film, and, was inspired by the passing of her own mother.
hmm,
Her mother has passed, and, she's trying to just get herself together, and that everyone can relate to that. Anyone, who's had a loss knows that you fall into a rut
yeah,
and you
yeah,
just look for other things to interject, to inspire you. You're looking for a new muse, and so she said, "I'm gonna go back to the place where I felt like I was dope." She goes to her boy Archie and says, "You remember how in high school I used to just rap, and who of us doesn't do that?"
mm,
You look for the place of comfort. You look for that. You try to remember that time. Someone said this interestingly about another movie where the character had just come out of jail, and the clothes that he was wearing were from a period where he felt most comfortable, and
mm,
all of us do that. I still have certain sneakers that I'll never give up because I know how they look on me. They bring me back to a certain time, and I'm
Mhm.
gonna stick with that. I'm not gonna put on the newness just because it's new.
Right.
And Radha does the same thing. She's like, I can rap, but I don't want to do the stuff that my kids are listening to. They're all listening to this sound called Pound the Pound Cake.
Oh
And
god.
she's like, what is this nonsense? So she goes to her roots. And what's dope is Radha, when she was coming up with the suggesting the music for the mixtape, she wanted it to be authentic. So she said, I want the beats to sound like beats that you would give to Sean Price, the rapper from Helter Skelter who passed
Mm,
away a couple years ago.
mm,
So she wanted that authentic Brownsville, Brooklyn sound. So Guy went to the beat miners from who did a lot of the beats for Black Moon and Smith and Wesson and the Boot Camp Click from the 90s.
mm.
And the beats you hear from them and Crisis, a producer who does a lot of stuff with Ninth Wonder and Little Brother. But he did beats for Sean Price as well. So
Right.
that's why when you watch the movie and you hear the beats, you're like, oh, these are actually good. These aren't throwaway filler beats that they
Mhm.
just came up with. Some movies when they decide they want to do hip hop beats, it's some, garage band recycled, you know,
Mhm.
cookie cutter stuff. But they went and got real producers, and real MCs for this movie. Oswin, interesting enough, is a dope rapper. The actor that plays D's producer, D,
Mhm.
is a really dope rapper in his own right. But it's so funny, his character doesn't speak much, so you would never know how good an MC he is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the movie is so specific, and I mean, we've had movies about hip hop. And I'm not trying to shade it, but you and I we saw this movie years ago, and we've
You're gonna
had
say Brown Sugar,
of
ain't you?
course I'm going to say Brown Sugar.
Go ahead.
And I know people are like, you can't compare. Yes, the fuck I can. Um, and the thing is, Brown Sugar was cute for what it was, but it never really felt like it just felt like it was a love story that they just sprinkled with hip hop. Like they were like,
Yes.
okay, we don't want another Love Jones. We've got two black people in love. What's the hook? You know what I mean? And so notice that the
Mhm.
supporting characters for both Sanaa and Tay Diggs' characters were both real life rappers, right? Her best friend, Sanaa's best friend was Queen Latifah. Tay
Mhm.
Diggs' best friend uh,
Most Def,
was
yes,
Most
and Def.
Def,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And it was just, and I mean, I said this when I saw Brown Sugar. I was like, y'all should have given the lead to Queen Latifah and Most Def. I was always
Yes.
feeling that way. So I kind of feel like 40-year-old version is sort of like,
They took that advice and said, "Let's make this movie with
yes, it's a
Latifah and Mos Def."
it's a course correction. It was basically a course correction in, because I know how the Hollywood execs were probably thinking. They were looking at Queen Latifah and they were looking at Most Def and they were like, you know what? They don't, the two of them, they don't fit the cookie cutter ideas of what a
Right,
leading lady and a leading man should look like in a movie, particularly a black love story. And that was something that I was
right.
having a conversation with this a few months ago in like, I'm always happy to see black love. But I
Mhm.
just don't want to see straight love. And I don't
Right.
always have to see cisgendered love. I want to see all types of love. I want to see queer love. I want to see love with like age gaps with the older and the younger. I want to see different body types, and more specifically when it comes to the black female leads in romantic movies. I'm tired of these women looking like you got to pass a paper bag test. Like I'm
Yeah.
just so tired of that. Like, but I feel that with 40-year-old version there, and I think particularly because Radha was, was basically spearheading this project, right? Because
Mhm.
I'm sure if it was up to the studios, they'd be like, oh, go get, you know, I don't know, Zendaya or whatever, anyone from
Right.
the 220 Fenty family. Um, I have love for Zendaya, but I'm just saying,
Right.
you know what I mean. So it's just sort of like, but this goes back to me saying that I felt seen by Radha, right? Because she,
Right.
to me, she's very attractive. She's a beautiful woman. But it's like when I looked at Radha, it's like I felt like I was looking at myself. I saw my aunts. I saw my friends. I saw my mom. There's like she has the cheekbones. It reminds me dead of my mom. It was just like, oh my God. And so, and she's not skinny, right? Because one of the running jokes in the movie is that she's drinking this shake, right? Because she
The
says
yeah, the diet drink, the
the
diet soda or
yeah,
something,
so
right.
throughout the movie you just see her with the straw and this cup in her hand because she's talking about she want to lose 40 by 40. And it was something that she said where she was like, you know what, after once you hit 40 it's not as easy to lose weight anymore. And I was
At
like, that
all.
is the day, because I remember when I used to go to the gym. This was when I was in my 20s. I could literally go to the gym 3 times a week,
For,
still,
like, 2 weeks,
yeah,
and lose, like,
and
20
yeah,
pounds.
and still eat McDonald's here and there, and I could just lose boo 5 pounds in one week. I could hit the treadmill 3 days a week, whatever, do whatever. And now, oh my God, it's
I
like,
remember I was there at New York Sports Club with you some mornings
yeah.
when
So
we were
it's like
struggling.
now today it's like it's 5 days a week. Gotta watch what I eat, and what do I gain? What do I lose? A pound, maybe half
Right,
a pound. And I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. But
right,
these are the things. But that's the thing that I loved about Radha is that she really talks about these, but she doesn't see them as them holding her back. Is just like it just is what it is, right? Like there's
right.
a part in the movie where she's rapping about being 40 and she says uh, I'm tired of my knees cashing checks that my writing checks that my back can't cash.
Can't cash, yep,
Girl.
yep. Yeah, she spits truth. I love her, because she reminds me of my college girlfriend. That's what's so funny. Like my
Yeah.
girlfriend in college was kind of like Rada,
Hmm.
similar build. She had water head. I mean, it was the '90s, so all the women were wearing head wraps. So
Right.
that's another reason why I felt such an affinity for not just the character but for her.
Mm.
But those lines that she's spitting are not throwaways. She's really saying some real stuff,
Hmm.
and people need to pay attention. Don't just think, oh, because she's doing it, she's not like a
Hmm.
quote unquote air quote professional MC, that it's not real. But also to your point, um, she said that the character D is like he's kind of an amalgamation of all the men who she didn't think she was worthy of,
Mm.
because she didn't think that they were really serious
Hmm.
about their interest in her because of her size. And she kind of been internalizing that, and how she kind of rejected guys before, but now this time she got to actually embrace the fact that he was interested in her. So
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
Because I think that was one of the things that I also loved about the movie is that she's also a very sexual person. Like this is someone she's
Yes.
very into. Like the opening scene is her listening to her neighbors have sex next door. She's got her face pressed up against the wall and everything. But what I especially liked about the movie is that it starts there, and then throughout the movie you see like these younger men like
Hmm.
flirting with her, like chasing
Flirting.
her, and
They are
just
throwing it at her.
they are.
That ain't flirting. There's nothing subtle about it.
I mean, and these guys are cute, and these are younger guys, and I could definitely relate to that because my 20s and my 30s. I mean, it's not like I was hurting for like I had some serious relationships. I dated and everything, but I never really felt comfortable. Like it really, I didn't really feel like I started hitting my stride until I was in my 40s. The 20s was just it was just like scratch paper. 30s was sort of like, okay, we're trying to have like a shape here. Let's do some sketching, right?
Right.
And then the 40s was like, okay, now it's time to get serious. Like once I hit 40, it was, like I had been going through some things in my 30s, and then once I hit 40, it was like, okay, but what is this really about? Like I don't want to say I wasted time. I feel like I gained valuable insight, and as women, we have to forgive ourselves when we make mistakes, whether it's professionally or personally or, in our love relationships. There's a lesson in everything, right? Um, and more importantly is to remember those lessons when you walk into your next relationship.
Right.
But yeah, like once I hit 40, it was just like, okay, but I mean, seriously, it's time to get serious, Rebecca. Like, and it wasn't even so much like, oh, I wanted to get married or be in like a committed relationship, but it was really more about committing to myself. That's what it was, because I felt like with my 20s and 30s, I was committing to other people and trying to
Mhm.
live up to their expectations. And then it was like, no, fuck that. And this is why when people say that people, women in their 40s are scary as fuck, you can't fuck with them, because once you know who you are and you
Right.
don't give a fuck what people think,
Mhm.
you're like, oh, you don't, okay. And I think for us, particularly as women, if you're into, dating men or whatever, what we think, what our men's opinions of us can trap us, right? Whether it's our look, our sexuality, or how we, choose to move. We're always afraid. We want to be chosen. In a way, we're in,
Right.
we're in pick me mode. That's where we're at. And then
Mhm.
once you hit 40, you're just like, no, well, I pick me. How about that? And then,
Nice.
yeah, and then it's all about what makes you happy. And, because I mean, I think this year will make it 10 years since I got into entertainment journalism. And I think I wrote my first film review when I was like 39, 40, right?
Right.
And so, well, actually a couple of years
Wow.
before I started it with music. Ha, funny enough, here we go. So I actually started off with music. I started off writing for all hip hop, and
Mhm.
then I wrote my first music review for The Source. I think it was J Live.
Yep.
And then I wrote that, and then that's when you tricked me into writing into a film review.
Why do you say it like that?
No, it was no, I joke. No, it was. I think the first piece that I ever wrote was when I did the Oscar predictions.
Oh yeah, you were definitely the one for that because I knew I was not the awards guy, and I'm like, who could write this? Oh,
Yeah,
you were always talking about it,
exactly.
so it just made sense for you to write about it. And
Yeah.
as I said then, and I'll say now,
Mm,
it's easier for me to teach someone who's passionate the mechanics
mm,
as opposed to taking someone who's maybe more sound mechanically, who might be a more experienced writer but doesn't really care about the subject matter.
oh,
You
absolutely.
had really passionate feelings about what movies were nominated and weren't and why they shouldn't have been. And I'm like, okay, why aren't you writing about film? And there was no real answer for why you weren't. So I said, here,
Yeah.
and here's some money. Go.
No, right? No, I mean, I think part of that is that imposter syndrome where you just don't feel. I mean, a big part of it is the fact that I didn't see at the time when I started, I didn't know any other Black women film critics.
Right.
All I saw were white men. It was Leonard
Mm,
Maltin, Siskel and Ebert, or whichever local, news station, the review for the week. It was some white dude. So it
right.
really wasn't you know, um, until I started Twitter, when I joined Twitter, and that's when I saw other Black women cinephiles either writing about movies or actually making movies. Um,
Mhm,
but that's all to say that it's like all of that coincided around the time that I turned 40. And I
mhm,
don't know that I would have done that if I was in my 30s. I would have been too scared. I'd have been
mm,
like, I'm not ready. I don't know enough. I didn't go to film school. I would just make all these. But at this time, turning 40, it was like, well, what have I got to lose? I mean, if I suck, I suck. I think you become more fearless, right?
yeah.
Where it's like you're not as afraid to fail. And then it's like, all right, that's fine. And I think with 40-year-old version, Radha is just so scared. She's so afraid of failing, and just the fact that she's kind of lost belief in herself. I mean, clearly we can see that she's talented, but it doesn't
Mhm,
mean anything if she doesn't believe it, right? And I think that kind of goes into the relationship that she has with D, who's her love interest. He is her producer, and they start a relationship. And the relationship between D and Rodda, I really, really loved it. Number
mm,
one, the older woman, younger man, it wasn't played for jokes. It really, I think
no.
it was mentioned in passing, like we know he's younger than her, but
His boys, had comments here and there, but he didn't care,
he didn't
you
give,
know?
he did not care at all. And I was having a conversation with a couple of other women film critics on Twitter earlier, and they were raving about the relationship too, because number one, to have a love interest who looks like Radha. Then she's got a younger male a younger love interest, right? And the thing with D is that he has an old soul, which is what I loved about him.
Mhm.
He's very smart. And the thing with their relationship that I appreciated was the fact that um D is what I call an active listener. Like when we talk about relationships, when they're portrayed on TV or film or whatever, usually the point of it is seeing the man pursue the woman, right? Whether
Mhm.
he's romancing her, spending money on her, these grand gestures. Everything about romantic comedies or romantic dramas is about the grand gesture, which is really bullshit. But
Flooding her office with the flowers and,
right, it's like,
yeah.
and then the end, they get happily ever after, and it's like, nah, that's not how real life works.
Right.
A grand gesture is good here and there, but the grand gesture is only as good as the other 364 days of normalcy, right? Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? If you're a shitty partner 364 days and then you give me a great Valentine, I don't give a fuck about that. Like, I don't care. You know what I mean? It's what did you do for me like November 9th or February, I don't know, 22nd. You know what I mean? Like, just,
Right.
and the thing with D is that he's somebody he doesn't say a lot. As I said, he's the master of minimalism.
He really is.
He doesn't say a lot, but usually there's like the strong and silent type, but D is not that. He's not that at all. He's just somebody. He's an observer. He's an observer of
Mhm.
people. He's an observer of behaviors, and even from the first interaction with Radha, we know that he listens. And throughout the movie, you'll see that Radha makes this assumption. She was like, "Oh, you're not listening to me, or you didn't catch this," and he's like, "No, I saw it." Or I heard it. You know what I mean?
Right, right,
And the thing with him is that being an active listener in relationships is about not only hearing what your partner is saying, but putting that into action. And throughout the movie, we see how D supports Radha. Like,
definitely, definitely.
she has like these moments of insecurity and self sabotage, but he's like, no, I know you're good. But more importantly, he's not doing it in a way that's like mansplaining. He's not trying to be like Captain Save a Ho. Like, he's not trying to do any of that. He's not.
Right,
He's just sort of like, I hear you, I support you, and but let me help you in a way where I'm not telling you what to do. Let me show you.
right,
So there's several scenes in the movie where you see that, where he just really believes in her talent, and just doesn't let her off the hook because she be coming with some bullshit. um
right.
yeah.
I wanted to know what you thought of that because
Mhm.
I've watched the movie now about 4 times, and the first time I watched it, I'm like, "Okay, yeah, this is sweet. He's being persistent."
Mm.
But then by the 3rd time, I'm wondering, like, ho would there be some people who would feel like, "Okay, well, he just showed up at her rehearsal and was getting into an argument with the security guard and was like, 'Yo, when are we gonna go finish this mixtape?'" And she's like, "I'm in a rehearsal. I'm doing it." He's like, "Yo, but what about this music?"
Mhm.
Like, at what point did he ever go from being supportive to being pushy in your mind?
um I mean, yes, some people could say that it was pushy. I mean, hmm it's a tricky one. But I think
Mhm.
that's real life. I think sometimes when you care about somebody or you're invested in somebody, like, you can just see the bullshit for what it is. And it was
Right.
like, it was a bullshit play. Like, that play that she was producing, it was bullshit. Like he said, I was like, I heard it from the hallway. That ain't your play. You know what I mean? Like, what he was trying to do is he was trying to to help her get to her authentic self. That play was
Right.
not her. You know what I mean?
At all.
That was about white gaziness and white consumption of black trauma, right? And that's where she did that whole, because what he was doing is that he was just trying to hold her accountable to that first rap that she did
Yep.
about poverty porn. And he was like, "Oh, but this what you doing? Didn't you just rap that you didn't want to do that you didn't want to, that you wanted to just portray regular black people?" Because the play that she's trying to produce is Harlem Ave,
Harlem Ave.
right?
Yeah.
Which is just about, this black couple trying to keep their grocery store alive. And then here come these white producers talking about, oh, you gotta, personify the gentrification by actually casting a white person in there. Just laziness, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think D was just sort of like, all right, you clearly are on some shit right now. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I'm gonna try to take you out of that environment and try to help you find yourself, but not really him saying anything. I mean, I'm sure people could, you know, interpret that scene, but I kind of feel like sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need an intervention. I looked at it as an intervention. That's what I saw,
Right.
because
Right.
she could have just told him, okay, you can leave, or she could have told the security guard, please escort him out of here. She was clearly in no danger. There was no danger. I don't
No,
think he
no,
was,
no.
you know what I mean? I'm sure there are some people who could be like, whatever. But again, I mean, we do see movies, right, where, like, for instance, say anything, right? John Cusack shows up on her lawn with a
Mhm.
freaking boombox, right?
Right.
So
Right.
we see this kind of thing, but usually it's because they're trying to woo the woman. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's like, I'm trying to get in your pants. I'm trying to, get you to reciprocate these feelings. But for him, it was really like, I'm trying to hold you accountable to your artistic integrity.
Right. I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely different. He definitely wasn't pursuing her to have sex.
Mm-mm.
You know what I'm saying? He was pursuing her for artistic reasons and because he saw something in her
Yes.
and saw that she was running away from it. And
Exactly.
even after she had the bad night, he was like, "Listen, you had a bad night.
Hmm.
You can do this. He heard, he's been sitting there. He's a producer who's sitting listening to people rap all day long.
Right.
Something about her stood out, and I know how that feels. That's how I felt, when I was getting on you to write. I was like, I sat there, I watch people, I read articles all day long.
Mm.
So you get an ear and an eye for when someone stands out, when you can hear their passion.
Right.
So in that way I related to D a lot, and that, like, you don't want to let people who have something waste it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I understand, like, there's this, it, and this is part of, like, my issue with social media sometimes, is that it becomes like this very policed and politically correct way of interacting with people that's just very antiseptic and doesn't really
Mhm.
speak to the real human experience.
Right.
Human beings are messy. And I'm not talking about sexual assault or, stalking people. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that when we see our friends or people that we care about drowning, so to speak,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
just kind of falling by the wayside, sometimes you do have to step in. Sometimes being a friend is saying the things that I don't want to hear, right?
Mhm.
Because this is I'm trying to be careful with my words here. I do feel that sometimes we want to be coddled. We become
Mm.
a society where we don't want to hear anything negative about ourselves. And I'm
At
saying,
all.
yeah.
Oh.
I'm reading this book right now that's called Conflict is Not Abuse by
Mm.
Sarah Schulman, and I would highly suggest anybody please read this book. I'm about a few chapters in, but she really goes in on how electronic, whether it's email, texting, social media, what it's done is, in a way, it has hampered our communication skills. People are saying, "Oh, it's so great. Here's more ways for us to communicate." But what it does is, in a way, we're still hindered in certain
Yeah.
ways, right? Like, how many times have you had a conversation with, like, a partner? It was a text, right? And it was like,
Mhm.
okay, fine. You know how it
You
goes.
read so much into what isn't there.
And
Like, you're like, "Wait a minute, what do you mean by okay
yeah.
or K?" The one letter that I've seen whole threads about how the letter K just makes people angry. I mean, me too, depending on the person. If I don't know
Absolutely.
you, if you hit me with a K, I'm like, "What? You didn't even have the respect to put 2 letters together to respond to me? Like, I'm just some whatever? Like, come on, man."
Right.
And it's become kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that
Mhm.
we have bad communication as humans, but then we have all these tools to communicate that make us even worse communicators and it, it repeats the cycle.
Right.
We have more ways to alienate each other than ever.
Right.
I can block you on Twitter, I can block you on Instagram, I can block you on Facebook, I can unfriend you. Before we would just stop talking to each other. You just tell somebody lose my number, right?
Yep.
Now it's I'm gonna block you on my phone. I gotta unfollow you. Then I gotta delete all of our messages, and it just becomes on like every social media platform. Like now I gotta block you on Snapchat,
Ugh.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram,
And that's not
Tumblr.
real life. And actually that is a perfect example because in the movie he tried texting her. He
Yep.
tried, you know what I'm saying? Like he tried
I
calling her.
text you 300 times and I don't text.
Right? And you just acted like, oh, you know what I mean? And so again, I'm sure people may have their own opinions, but I feel like D was just like, I think a human connection, like actually seeing me is different.
Hmm.
And that, in the book that I'm reading, it is true because even though you're texting or emailing or whatever, it is still one directional in nature,
Mm,
right? Because you have to wait for the person to send it, then you read it, and then you respond, right? So it's not the same as you and I talking in real time.
mm.
It's not, I can't see your facial expressions, right?
Right.
I can't hear the inflection in your voice. I can't, you know what I mean? So this is what causes a lot of miscommunications. This is what causes a lot of passive aggressiveness, right?
Hmm.
Because I always feel that when you communicate, speaking to someone face to face is much different than when you are communicating electronically, right?
Yeah.
And I think particularly in relationships, yeah, because when you watch Radha and Dee's relationship, it really starts to flourish and grow once they have that face to face contact,
Yes.
right?
I love the way
Hmm.
they commiserated over their mothers, for
Yep.
example. Like she didn't find out that, he had lost his mother. She just assumed his mother was still around. He was like, "Oh, she's not here." And she didn't even tell him right away. You would think she would say, "Oh, well, yeah, I lost my mother too." But she waited,
Hmm.
for some reason. I guess she just didn't want to open up just yet. But when they finally do, it's one of the most beautiful moments in the movie. I'm not gonna,
Right.
give it away, but it was really touching the way they came together on that one topic. And I think it went a long way to instilling her trust in him
Hmm.
because, like you said, he's an active listener, so he was internalizing what she was saying. But then she also had her moments when she put her walls up because he was like, "Why are you always wearing that thing on your head?" She's like, "What does D stand for?" He was like, "True." So they both had their limits on what they were willing to
To share, right.
share. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay,
Mm,
we're not there yet. Yeah, we're close, but I gotta keep something to the chest yet. I'll share that with you later.
yeah. And I think I just love seeing the relationship flourish in real time. I mean, I know some people are sensitive. They're like, you can have relationships online too. I mean, understandably, we're in quarantine. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. So there's a lot of people, finding love, on Tinder and whatever. And however you find it, I don't care whether, you meet at a play or you meet online, swipe left, swipe right, whatever it is, I think any relationship, however you form it is valid. But I do feel that um there's definitely you have to put that time into spending time with that person, right?
Yeah.
I don't feel that DMing people back and forth, that's just an introduction, okay?
Right.
Like that's not really going to get you what you want. And again, this whole, being politically correct or whatever, there's some truths that people don't want to hear. It's like, listen, you meet somebody online, you only know that much about them. Even if you
Right.
follow them for 3 or 4 years, right? You still don't really know who they are
At all.
at
Let me tell
all.
you, I've had the pleasure of meeting some folks I met from social media on offline,
Hmm.
and 9 times out of 10, they're nothing like they are online. And that's not a slight to them at all. The interaction is just different. And then there are people who I knew more in person, and I see them online. I'm like,
But it,
that's not the person that I know. That's not the person that my interactions aren't like this. And like, if I only knew them from social media, I'd be like, who are I don't want to talk to that person. But then I'm like, but if anybody knew that they're like the sweetest person in the world. But I guess folks, they don't want to show the whole world their vulnerabilities or whatever. So,
Yes.
but I've just learned to read the Matrix Code. I don't take anything that I read online as that person.
Mm-hmm.
Like you do not know someone just from following them on social media. I promise you. If you've never met them in person, you don't know them.
Yeah, yeah, and
You know.
that's the thing about, if you want a fulfilling relationship, is that it's putting in the time and being willing to be vulnerable, like you said, and
Hmm.
that's not easy. And I think in this movie, I think that's something that Radha is working through, because she has a lot of walls. The imposter syndrome, just being disappointed in her career and then dealing with the death of a parent, like
Mm.
that's a lot to deal with, and people make this assumption that because you get older, when you lose your parent, that it may not hurt as much as, say, let's say, if you no, it doesn't matter. You could be
No, it does
65 years
not.
old and you lose your mama, you still gonna cry. That's still
Hmm.
gonna hurt, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. And so, yeah, so she's kind of working through all these things, but I just love that she just has this humor and this sarcasm. And the thing with Radha is that the camera loves her. The
Yes.
expressions on her face, because
She's so expressive.
she
She's so
is, because
expressive.
in some way she does kind of remind me of Issa on
Mm,
Insecure, right? Like where she has, like, because Issa has mirror bitch, right? Because
right.
throughout 40-year-old version, we do see scenes of Radha, rapping to
Hmm.
herself, and just that, like the mirror, the self, right? So there's
Right.
but what I did realize is that there is a difference, right? Um, a lot of times, um, the things that Issa says to herself, that mirror bitch says to her, or even like the fantasies she may have in her head, she doesn't actually do them.
Right.
Whereas Rodda does do them. And you know
Right.
which scene
Right.
I'm talking about. I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
thinking when she did that, it was gonna cut to her just thinking it. No, she really did that. Like she's about that life. I was like,
Yes. Yes. I think in Radha's case, her rapping persona is not an alter ego. It's more of a revelation, or her kind of unleashing
damn, right.
what's inside,
Mm-hmm.
and it's truth. Whereas Issa's mirror alter ego is things she's trying to avoid
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of cases, or doesn't want to confront.
Yeah.
But this is Radha is definitely trying to, she's projecting and putting out the things that are inside. So I think that's one of the differences between the two. And she's not running from that persona. That she's talking more to herself as an affirmation,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Isso's, her relationship with her mirror bitch is confrontational.
Radha is mirror bitch.
Right. Radha is her own mirror bitch, But then she had that one moment where she was just so, back when you were talking about her mother, like, because her mother was an artist, right? So she was unpacking that as well, not just the loss of a parent, but her mother came to New York to fulfill certain dreams, and she was avoiding, unpacking her apartment because she knew what that meant as an artist. She was like, "You come here, and this is what happens. You put your stuff in storage," because she was projecting on herself.
Right.
She was like, "Okay, my mom didn't achieve maybe the level of a success that she wanted, so am I just repeating this cycle?" You know. So that was one of the poignant moments for me when she was sitting there with the rib, and she was like, "Mommy, help me." And it was just everything about that was just so real to me, because she had been, remember, she had been avoiding eating the ribs all night because she was watching her weight or
Yeah.
whatever. But it was just her finally just giving in, and she's just sitting there, and she's just like looking for help from somewhere. And just the way she just held the rib in her hand, and she was just like, "Mommy," I felt that. I'm just saying, I felt it.
She's great. Yeah, it's and the thing is, even though it is it's the movie is a meditation on the theater world. Um but for me, being a film and TV person, I was like, so much of what she was struggling against, or the challenges she was facing as a Black creative, you could easily apply that to film and TV, because she one of the things she talks about is how, in a way, she has to, the art that she has, for it to be palatable to a white audience, it has to have certain aspects of black trauma and black pain, right?
Mm.
Because that's it, and
Right.
that's what she calls poverty porn. And I don't think that I don't think it's about poverty shaming. I don't think that's what she's talking about. I think she's talking about the fact that as black artists, we're put in this box, right? Where when you're a black filmmaker, we're only allowed to make certain types of films, right? It's either the comedy, the slapstick comedy, the biopic, or it has to be a movie that has a message.
Right.
It has to be about something, right? And I'm
Right.
not knocking any of these genres. I think historical biopics are good when
Mm.
they're directed by black people. Um, Talking about you, Green Book. And
Ooh.
you know what I mean? Like I don't have a problem when you have a movie like Boys in the Hood or whatever, like because those filmmakers come from there. Like that's
Right.
like they're using the art to talk about where they're from. I think what Radha is talking about is a frustration in the fact that we are limited in the kind of stories that that we can tell, right? Because there's a scene where her agent goes to go see this other play, right, that the white producer is putting on, and it is literally just two white people on a stage talking about veganism, like talk about nothing, literally talking
Right.
about bullshit. But yet that white playwright or whoever
Hmm.
wrote that, they just got a carte blanche. They were like, "Oh, you're just
Right.
going to talk about the human condition and nobody dies, nobody." Oh, great. You know what I mean?
Right. We don't get that grace.
Yeah, like
Right.
for me, I'm thinking about, let's talk about two of the best black actors, right? We're talking about Denzel Washington and Angela
Hmm.
Bassett, right?
Right.
The only movie to my knowledge that they've done together is Malcolm X, right? He played Malcolm X and she played Betty
Right.
Shabazz. Now, why couldn't now if I was a black filmmaker, right? Let's say I had a story. Actually, this is something that I've been cooking in my head, but I'll give another one. I'll keep the one that I really want to myself. But just as an example, let's just say we want to make a movie with Denzel and Angela Bassett, and they are a family. They've been married, and then they decide, I don't know, maybe Angela decides she wants to be a lesbian or whatever, or there's something that goes on. It's just a regular schmegler black
They want to get a
drama.
taco truck.
Yes.
They want to get a food truck. You know how
Okay.
that great movie that
Yeah. Chef.
the
Chef.
huh?
Chef. Right.
Yes.
I love
Like,
that show. I love
why
that movie.
couldn't we have a movie like that
Mm-hmm.
where it's not we have adversity, sure,
Yeah.
but it's not steeped in,
Black trauma.
violence or
Mm-hmm.
trauma
Mm-hmm.
or oppression. Of
Right.
course, oppression for black folks in America is ever present, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't live our lives every day thinking about oppression
Right.
or being oppressed.
Mm-hmm.
We can live in spaces where we're just existing amongst ourselves, and we need more films that are just like that.
About the
And
human experience.
right.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. But see, if we went to the studios and said, I have this movie with Denzel and Angela, and as they're just a married couple and they're just going through some stuff, maybe, whatever, their son, blah, blah, whatever, right? They're not gonna green light that movie because they'll be like, well, what's the catch?
Right.
Does
What's gonna make white people want to see
Yeah,
this?
like does their son get shot down by the cops? Is there,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? Like there has to be some shit in there and whatever. Meanwhile, you could get two random white actors like fucking Meryl Streep. Sorry, Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep. You could get Meryl
Hmm.
Streep and let's say Stanley Tucci, right? Okay, well they actually did a movie together. They did
Right.
Julia and Julia. But I'm just saying, like you could get two white actors and they could just be like, oh, they're a married couple and they decide to go on a vacation and whatever. Like that is literally the movie that Angelina Jolie made with Brad Pitt. Okay, they
Mm.
got married and then for their honeymoon, I forget the name of the movie. It'll come to me. It was literally, Jerry, a movie about a married couple and something happens to them. It's something, I think she had like a miscarriage or something, but it was just, the studio was like, oh, it's Angelina and Brad. Sure, here.
Right.
You get
Was
to
that by the sea?
by the sea, right?
Yeah.
Just
Mhm.
just a white drama. That's all I'm gonna call it. It was beautiful. It was beautiful to look at. Beautiful, and I love beautiful cinematography. Even if the movie may not be all that great, if you give me beautiful cinematography, that's eye porn for me. So I don't have a problem with that.
Right.
That all to say, why couldn't black actors be able to do that very same movie? Why couldn't Taraji and, say, I don't know, name a black actor, be able to do a movie like that? We would not get the green light for that. It would have to be like, okay, Taraji, you're going to Italy and you're a cop, and the two of you go touristing and you get beat up by these white Italian tourists. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, it would have to be a,
Traffic.
yeah, right? And I think that is what Radha is talking about. It's really trying to push back against letting black artists have the freedom to make whatever the they want. And it could be as mundane as as a couple sending their kid away to college, right?
Right.
Because that's what the kids are all right. That's what that was about, right?
Right.
It was a lesbian couple. Julia, it was and oh god, I'm forgetting the actors, but it was Julianne Morrison, and someone else. I forget what her name is. And it was just they were just like a happily married lesbian couple, and then the person who was their sperm donor for their two biological children enters the equation. That's it. And it
That's it.
and it just reveals the rifts in their marriage and the limitations of their marriage, and just really showing that even lesbian marriages have the same challenges as hetero marriages, right? And it was I,
Yeah.
I like that movie. But again, we don't get to, at least the studios, and I feel like black artists, we have to give ourselves permission to make whatever the fuck we want. We shouldn't wait for the gatekeepers. All I'm saying is that the money that you would need from the studios, they would not say that, and they would not let you do that. And I think that is what Radha is really trying to say, is the fact that we shouldn't have to create these black narratives that feed a certain fetish that white audiences like they like to see us suffer. They like broken black bodies, and it makes me so uncomfortable sometimes when I see white critics reviewing movies like that, or white critics
Right.
talking about movies like that, because it's like we're not even human. Like, even when they're
Right.
watching the movie, like, even the way that they talk about these films, it's like, this is a person, right? But what it becomes is, it becomes a symbol, it becomes a thing, and it becomes an
Right.
issue, not realizing that. And we kind of see an example of that is what happened with Breonna Taylor, right? Like, she became a hashtag, and then all of a sudden people were just profiting off that shit, right? I think
Right.
last month they did some sort of expo. I mean, they said, I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
they claimed that they didn't charge any, but they did like some sort of panel called Beauty, Power, and Money, or something like. And I was just like, and it was like some of,
What does this have to do with Breonna Taylor
yeah, and
at
it was
all?
some Atlanta housewives. And I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me right now? Like, this was a young woman that was killed in her apartment because the cops bust in there. Like, the narrative got lost. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Is it like she just becomes a symbol, and that's what happens when we make these types of movies about black trauma and pain. The white moviegoers that go to see it, because that's who the studio wants to appeal to, let's be real, they don't really walk out of the studio, they don't really walk out of those theaters really seeing our humanity. I don't really
No.
believe that, because I remember when Fruitvale Station came out, right? There was this discussion. Well, these type of movies, these are white critics now. These type of movies are important, right? Because when white people see, that's how people will really understand, police brutality and whatever. And then what happened? Fruitvale Station happened, and then who happened? Trayvon Martin happened. Then Freddie Gray
Yeah.
happened. It was like, you know what I mean? Like, the list. And then now there's going to be a movie about Trayvon Martin. There's going to be a movie about Mike Brown, and you know what I mean. And then it's like it becomes commodified. It's like
Yeah.
this consumption. I think you said that, where you said it was like an amusement park, black.
Yeah, they can only deal with black people from a point of reference where we're victimized,
Hmm.
and anything outside of that doesn't compute. It's like syntax errors, like black happiness. Like, wait, I thought, because they can only help us or see our, assist with injustice if they see us as perpetual victims,
Hmm.
because they use our happiness to justify our pain, and it's terrible that that's how limited their scope is. They're like, they look at us and they say, "Oh well, oh, you're." They look at the rich who might speak up and say, "Well, you have money. Why are you complaining?" or you're famous, why are you complaining? So the only way they'll listen to you is if you're broke, on your deathbed and have no notoriety. But then you don't listen to those people.
Hmm.
You don't listen to the poor, you don't listen to the homeless. So who are you going to listen to then? I mean, that tells me you don't want to listen to anyone critique this country or the systemic inequalities, because you complain when the people who have step up and say, you know what, this isn't right. The first thing they say is, "Oh, you're rich. Why are you complaining?"
Mhm.
Or you're in a movie. "Oh, you're really impoverished." Or you're an athlete. Or LeBron James. What does he have to be upset about? Okay, right. So it's
He's
like,
still a
okay,
black man. What are you
he
talking
has
about?
children, he has a wife, they don't walk around with, labels on their head that say, "I'm LeBron James' son." The
Right.
cops don't give a damn,
Mm.
you know, but then they don't want to listen to them. But then, okay, all right, fine. Here's someone who is working class, who wants to make $15 an hour, and you're shouting them down. So you just be honest and say you don't want to hear from anybody.
That is true. And I think the other thing too with Radha's movie is that I think she was she ain't mentioned no names. I think people who watch the movie will know who she's talking about. I think this movie is sort of a call-in because it's within our own community. This movie is
Mm,
kind of a call-in of black artists and creatives that give in and give that kind of shit. That
mm,
create that go to these studios and networks and they're like, "Oh, okay, I guess with like it's basically like a laundry list because in that rap she was basically listing all the things that need
yes,
to be in a black movie to get." And I was like,
to get
"Damn,
a greenlit.
I've
Yep.
seen this." And I was like, in that movie. And so there has to be an honest conversation about black creatives. And let me be clear, like I said, movies like Friday, like if that's the community that you come from and that is in your heart where you want to talk about these things, right? Like
Right.
Moonlight is very specific in the fact that both Barry Jenkins and Terrell McCraney grew up in Florida. That whole thing, the whole community that we saw in Moonlight, that's where they grew up. They
Right.
shot there. You know what I mean? And Barry tells this hilarious story. He did a speech at South by Southwest where he was like, when I went to shoot Moonlight, number one, they didn't recognize him, right? A lot of people from the
Hmm.
neighborhood didn't recognize him. And then the kids and even the adults were like, "You sound funny." Like you don't talk to, I mean, because Barry went away, he went to
Hmm.
college or whatever. So they didn't
Right.
they
Right.
didn't trust him at first because they were like, this interloper that's gonna try to tell our story in our community. He doesn't know what he's talking. They thought he was like some bougie black person. And then he came with the receipts. And Terrell, they were like, "No, we grew up here. This is the high school we went to. This is," and they were like, "Oh, okay." So a movie like Moonlight, that is from them. That is the actual, it's not like an anthropological study of like, "Oh, I'm this upper class black person. I'm trying to see how the poor black people live." No,
Right.
that's not what.
Another great example of that is Blind Spotting. That was a love letter to Oakland.
Yes.
Even though
Yes.
it dealt with systemic issues and oppression. If you haven't seen Blind Spotting, go get it. Go watch it.
Mm,
I think it's on Hulu
right.
now.
Right.
But, David and Raphael were fantastic in that.
Hmm.
But it came, like you said, it came from their perspective and their experience. So there wasn't this whole kind of outsider looking in, Tarzan type of deal going on with it.
Exactly. Exactly. And so I think even with black creatives, even being a black creative, even being a black person, not all of us are qualified to tell specific black stories.
True.
You know what I'm
Facts.
saying? Like, again, going back to Moonlight, Terrell McCraney wrote the play. When it came to doing the movie, Barry was like, "I can't write that." Because I think they wanted
Right.
him. He was like, "No, you got to bring Terrell back and let's work on this, right?" Because you
Hmm.
needed because Barry was like, I'm a black straight man. I don't know what it's like to be black and queer. I can have an empathy, I can have an
Right.
idea, but Terrell can fill in and bring in the colors that I can't. You know what I
Right.
mean? So I think Radha is really talking about also our responsibilities as black artists, like the art that you want to bring into the world. Like why do you want to tell that specific story, and are you qualified to tell that? Well, white directors, they don't like you to tell them shit, because when it comes to white directors, they're like, "I should be able to tell every story, whatever, and if I want to do a black movie, I can." Okay, go with God. But there are some stories that you can't tell. Like there are some things that you don't like. For instance, like the Whitney Houston biopic, while it is going to be written by a black woman, it's the director of The Photograph, Stella Meggy. She's writing.
Hmm.
No, I'm sorry. Stella Meggy is directing it, but the
Hmm.
screenplay for the Whitney Houston biopic, they picked the guy from Bohemian Rhapsody, some white
Oh.
ass dude from like, I think he's Australian or from New Zealand. I'm like, what do you know about Newark, New Jersey? Because then I'm asking myself, what kind of Whitney Houston movie are we gonna get? Are we gonna get Nippy?
Oh.
Are we gonna get Whitney? Because
Mm-mm.
you gotta tell both sides. You can't
Right.
just give us a glamorized. But I think that's what's going on, because this movie will actually have the rights to the Whitney Houston movie. I think her mother is involved. Clive Davis is a producer, so you already know where that's
Oh.
going.
Yeah.
So we're just
Yeah.
gonna get like the montages and the fashion and everything. But it's like, number one, are y'all gonna talk about the fact that Whitney was queer? No, because to this day her family still denies that shit, right?
Hmm.
And also, what kind of authenticity are you as a white male screenwriter? Are you gonna move to Newark, New Jersey, and actually I have questions, you know what I'm saying? And it's just sort of like, and then what happens is, I've talked to other, black filmmakers and people in the business, and what happens is they bypass a lot of these qualified black screenwriters, because when that news came out with Whitney Houston, I listed at least 10 black women screenwriters who could have
Mm.
easily written that script. And they, like,
Hmm.
for instance, Shannon Houston, who is a writer and producer on Lovecraft Country. She's the one who wrote episode 7. She would murder a Whitney Houston screenplay, okay?
Right.
And murder it in all the right ways. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And we've got Ko Oyugen, Nikyatu. Like, there's so many talented black women screenwriters, but they bypass us, and then it's like, no, it's only legitimate if a white person writes the black experience. And then you know what happens? He's gonna, and I'm gonna predict what's gonna happen. He's gonna write this fucking screenplay. It's gonna be white as hell, unsalted, no seasoning, and what they're
He
gonna
said
do,
unsalted.
yes, they're gonna hire a script doctor, because Hollywood does this. So what they're gonna do is they're gonna outsource, and then they're gonna hire a black woman or either a black male
To
screenwriter
fix it.
to fix it and be like, can you just add some seasoning to this, and whatever, and would Whitney wear a hair scarf at this scene? What would that look like? And whatever. And it's like, well, why don't you just go to the fucking source? Why didn't you just fucking hire a black woman screenwriter? You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, but this all goes to 40-year-old version is this idea of the legitimacy of black art, and how white gatekeepers are forever fucking telling us what is legitimate, what is worthy to be greenlit, what isn't, and it's only a certain type or certain types of black narratives that they are interested in. and
Right.
and that's, sorry to ramble, but it's just so frustrating when I think about this. I was like, a white man is gonna write a Whitney Houston movie. I just can't.
Yeah, she takes what I love is that she takes the shots at the theater, but it definitely translates to Hollywood too. When he asked her
Mhm.
about doing a Harriet Tubman musical, he's like, of course, studios are like, "Oh, well, Hamilton popped. We should definitely do something that's a copycat of that." And that's just the way the machine works.
I, t-
There's
I
no
I made a list of the projects that this white producer had done. He did an all female 12 Angry Men.
right,
He was planning to do a multiracial Fences. This is an August Wilson play, a black on
right,
black play, and you're gonna make it
right,
multiracial. Then he was
right,
the Harriet Tubman musical. Then wasn't he
right.
trying to do a Shirley Chisholm?
Yeah, it evolved. Harriet Tubman became Shirley Chisholm's
Child.
musical.
And then he
Right.
and then he did an all male Steel Magnolias. I'm sorry, I'm trying not to. But you see how brilliant Radha is, right? Because
Yes.
this also talks about the fake forced diversity that's
Right.
in Hollywood now. Instead of finding and it applies to plays too, instead of finding new creative new and original ideas and IPs from black creatives,
Mhm.
Hollywood's new thing is just race bending, like, let's do a all female this, let's do a XYZ. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm just like, I don't know. Would I watch a all male Men Steel Magnolias? No,
No,
I would
I barely watched the original Steel Magnolias. I don't want to watch it with dudes.
I'm sorry. I'm still trying to recover from a multiracial offense. But it's gonna
And
be
his name was Whitman. She didn't even try to disguise
oh right.
it.
He was
Josh Whitman,
oh the
white
actor
man.
the actor they picked to play the white producer. Oh my god. We
Oh,
know we know these
Reed
people.
Burney.
Yeah. Yeah.
Reed Burney. Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a really clever movie. And it's really smart and it's really insightful, and you can tell that Radha knows what the hell she's talking about, because you could only be in the industry to talk about something like that. And I don't know. I mean, I have my little dreams and aspiration that I want to, be a screenwriter or whatever. But it's like between this movie and just conversations I have online with other Black people that are in the business, I'm like, it's so fucking dirty.
Mm.
Like, you have to sell out and you have to compromise. And it's like, what can I live with where I can look at myself in the morning, but also pay this rent?
Well, that's what makes this movie that much more important, is that she talks about her struggle to not sell out, and that a movie like this was actually made and produced. Shout out to Lena Waithe for
Yay.
opening up her pocketbooks
Mm-hmm.
at Hillman Grad to finance the film, because we don't know if we'll get more like this. We always, every 5 years, we say this, we get that one movie where we feel like, okay, finally we're gonna get some real human Black movies,
Mm-hmm.
and then crickets. So unless it's indie, it's indie or direct to video, shout out to Netflix and Hulu. But as far as, even though theatrical releases are a moot point now, we struggle to get movies that have us just as human beings. Like, The Photograph shouldn't have been as big a deal as it was, in the sense that it had been so long since we'd had a Black romance
Yeah.
on screen on a major theatrical release. It had been ye- when was the last time before it? It was like a decade. It felt like. So, and it put so much pressure on that one movie to be everything to everybody, when we should be getting these movies coming out constantly.
Right.
You know.
Right. And that's that goes into the conversation about Black film and TV criticism, right? It's like, um for me, I was just like, I'm of the opinion that more content is good. Um, and the thing is, we need to have the content in order for us to critique it, right? If you're only looking for boutique high quality all the time, that's not
Mhm.
really how Hollywood works, right? Because if we look at how mainstream movies work, right? We've got really, really shitty movies, then mediocre movies, then, oh, this was a fun watch, right? This was worth
Right.
my
Right.
$15. And then you go all the way to the apex, which is sort of like art house, right?
Hmm.
Academy Award worthy, right? So in order to do that, because that's the other thing people need to realize, that with these studios, you got to have those big, loud, obnoxious blockbusters, right, that bring in the $1 billion box office in order to finance those family dramas or those intimate,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? So that whole spectrum that mainstream film has, I feel that Black film needs to have that too. And that's not to say that we should give Black films or TV shows a pass.
Right.
If you're a critic, you should tell the truth. If you don't like it, that's fine. If you don't, my only issue is, I follow Cinemact. Her name is The Truths on Twitter, and it was something that she said that really shifted the way that I thought about film and TV criticism, particularly with Black content. Is she was like, we got to stop this virtue signaling, right? Like,
Mm.
sometimes we have these holier than thou, and they know who the fuck they are. Holier than thou. I call them Super Saiyan woke Black Twitter, right? Because they will just come with a hot take and it'll be like, girl, send it back.
Right.
And it's sort of like, and it's not enough for them to just critique the show. Then they critique the people who enjoy the show, right? Oh,
Right.
if you like XYZ show, then that means blah, 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 right? You don't
Hmm.
know these people. What are you talking about? Like, listen, I used to watch, well, up until recently, I could sit there and I could watch on a typical Sunday, I could watch Real Housewives of Atlanta, and then I'd flip the channel and watch the Good Wife. You know what
Right.
I mean? Or I'd watch Insecure. And this was what the Trudes was saying, is that for Black viewers, our consumption is everything. We watch everything. It's never
Yeah.
if you say that you love, I'm just going to use an example. If you like, I don't know, Lovecraft Country,
Hmm.
right? It doesn't,
Which I do.
which you do. Okay. If you don't like Lovecraft Country, that's fine. I the same way I can't make a judgment on you because you don't like it. You can't make a judgment on somebody because they do like Lovecraft Country, because then it's a question of their intelligence, and then it becomes a question
Hmm.
of their taste. And it's like, please take a nap. Like, please go find something, go move around. Like, really, go find some toys, if you know what I'm saying, and just shut the fuck up. Like, I just don't understand it. It's like people like all sorts of things. And I think that is actually that makes you a better critic. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, after I get off I'm about to go watch The Boys.
Oh wait, is it what?
Yeah.
Oh, it's Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah. What
Yeah,
is it? In,
they usually drop it, at least for me, on Amazon Prime. I usually get it the day before. By Thursday night,
oh,
I
on
can watch
Thursday.
it. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can watch it
Ooh.
Thursday.
Uh-oh.
So there's
Ooh,
a
ooh.
breadth. I feel like the reason why I can talk about film, because I watched everything ever since I was a little girl. My mom would watch Mission Impossible, then we watched Star Trek, and we watched The Honeymooners, and then we watched Man from Uncle. Like, there was like this whole diet of things that we were watching where my parents weren't really like, my mother wasn't like, you can't like this show because it's not smart. It was like, oh, this is entertaining. Okay, great. You know what I mean? So you
Right.
have to be able to watch all types of content in order for you to have an opinion on something. But again, the virtue signaling where you're judging people, just say you don't like the show. Write
Right.
your review and keep it moving. And just shut the fuck up. Like, I really don't, I can't, you know what I mean? And it's like, there were people that like Green Book. There were people that
Hmm.
I did not like the movie. There were black people who like Green Book. That's fine.
The only thing I might criticize you on is your reasons for or against something. Like
Okay.
you not liking something's fine, but why?
Mhm.
And if you have a well thought out argument for why you like it or don't like it, I'm like, okay, cool. But then you have people, like you said, who just don't like it because of who's involved or because of what they presume or project the politics of it to be,
Mm,
and then decide they don't like the movie.
mm.
And then that's when they start going after the people who like it because they're then projecting onto them like, well, you must be this if you like this. I'm like, no, this isn't the presidency. I judge you on whether or not you like Trump. Absolutely. If you if you vote for that man, that tells me something
That's fair.
about you
Absolutely.
without question. I don't
Yep.
want to hear another word. I'm like, I have you pegged.
Mm.
I am definitely stereotyping you. But I'm not about to stereotype you, you know, if you like or dislike a certain movie unless I see a pattern. And I will just say this, that I see a lot of
Mm.
critics online and it seems like a lot of them don't like black shit. And it's
Oh,
like they
oh,
make their living, you know, critiquing black shit but don't seem to like black shit. So I'm like, do you like any black
you
shit?
didn't
Cuz
have
it seems like
you had to go
you
there,
don't like.
Jerry. Okay, that's fine.
I'm just saying for me, just observing the Twitterverse, it just seems like some people are making their living not liking black shit.
That's a
So,
whole other podcast. That's a whole, but I totally understand.
because I'm definitely keeping an eye out to see who has what to say about 40-year-old version.
Yeah, I mean,
Because I can almost already predict who, based on what I've seen in the
mhm,
patterns,
mhm.
are gonna have who's gonna have positive things to say and who's gonna have negative things to say about it.
Right. And I think at a certain point, you just have to have like, I don't like, you have to have 360 vision, but you also have to have tunnel vision. Tunnel vision in the fact that if you have an opinion on something and that's how you really feel, if you're writing a critique or a review of something, as long as you can back it up, right? Even if it is, like I say, criticism is an informed opinion, right? So if
Exactly.
you say, this is why I like it, and this is why, these are the scenes, this is the narrative, then that's fine, whether I agree with it or not. But yeah, it's just, yeah, you can't really know somebody by what they watch. Because here's the thing, and again, people don't want to hear this. Human beings like problematic shit. Yes, we do. I'm sorry, Super
Mhm.
Table, Twitter. That's just the way it is. There's some shit that I like. That's
I
problematic.
spend most of my nights watching Rick and Morty. if we're being honest, because and late at night I don't like to watch new things
Right.
because I might fall asleep, and I just like to have background.
Mm,
I've watched every season of Rick and Morty probably 20 times because it's smart and it's goofy and silly,
yeah.
and they have some racism jokes and digs here and there, but overall it really has nothing to do with race, and I'm fine with that.
Right.
But I'm also loving the 40-year-old version,
Mm,
so yeah.
yeah. I mean, because the thing is, you can, like, there's a lot of shows. There's shows that I'm revisiting now, let's say 20 years later, right? For instance, I'm watching Girlfriends, right? Girlfriends was my
Hmm.
was my shit, okay? And because on UPN used to come on Monday nights, and when it moves to the CW, it moved to Sunday nights. So revisiting Girlfriends has been very interesting to me. Same with Sex and the City, because I did a rewatch of Sex and the City, and I appreciate both shows. And I will say this, that I believe both of them deserve to be in the canon of female driven shows. But one of course has more legitimacy than the other, and you know why. That being said, it's like I see problematic shit in Sex and the City. I was watching it and I was like, oh wow. You know what I mean? And that's years of experience, reading, being on social media, and befriending people from other marginalized communities. Like, oh, okay, that was a trans joke. That was offensive. Or
Right,
the episode where Carrie was dating this bisexual man and then befriending bisexual men and be like, okay, that was problematic. So you can watch problematic shit and still be aware that it's problematic. You know what I'm
right.
saying? Like, that's, I think you can do both, right? But what happens is that there's this narrowness where it's just like this needle of the eyes, like it has to be 100% problematic free, and I'm like, that's not art.
Right.
If that's,
Life is not
yeah,
problematic.
because you know what that is? That's a fucking after school special. That's what the fuck that is.
And I've watched some shows of late where it feels like they're writing from Black Twitter, or just writing to either they're just recycling things they've read on Twitter.
Oh, you know,
I'm serious,
I would
but
definitely want.
maybe I've said too much.
No,
It's
no,
getting
no,
late.
no. I did want to touch on that because that is true. Watching 40-year version, I was thinking about that too. These are conversations that I've been having with Black content creators, screenwriters, and directors. Is this, yeah, it's this thing where it's sort of like it has to be Black Twitter approved. And I was like, I don't think that's a good thing, because Black
Mm-mm.
Twitter is so fucking vast, right?
Yeah,
And it's like, well, but then again, it's about being approved to Black woke Twitter, right? And people could be mad at me.
and they don't like nothing. So why are you catering to them?
I mean,
Because you cater to woke Twitter, they ain't gonna come to your movie. They ain't gonna buy your album. They're gonna. Nah,
do you?
I'm saying
Yeah, I think for art, you have to write for yourself. I think you have to, when you sit down, you're like, okay, as long as I try not to, you're not going to try to offend anybody. You're not going to do any trans jokes or, racist jokes or, ableist jokes with disabled people. I feel like those are the things that you're, okay, let me not offend these, communities that have always been marginalized. Let me not further marginalize them. But at the same
right,
time, you've got to walk this tightrope where you have to show that even as human beings, the characters in your movie or your TV show, they have to be problematic. If they're not problem, again,
then there's no conflict.
yeah, it's this sanitized vision of blackness that I just don't. I'm like, this is not how people live. This is not how people talk. And it goes to what you're saying about how we're watching Black content now, where it feels like the screenwriters just scroll through Twitter and they're just
Right.
using like specific words like patriarchy and I don't know, like these buzzwords. And it's like,
Oh yeah.
and I'm like, listen, when we're talking, if you're having like talks, academic talk, right? Or
Right.
what they talk, ivory tower talk. Like, there are certain terms, absolutely. If you're doing an article or whatever and you're trying to dissect something, that's fine. But if you're actually just having a regular schmegler character talk like that, it doesn't sound realistic. Like, that's not what I'm talking to my sisters about. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, that's not, you know what I mean? Like, these things affect us, but the way that we talk about it and the way we engage with each other when we talk about these issues, we don't actually use that language. And if you
Hmm.
do, you should probably check to see if this person has a battery in their back. Like, it's,
No one uses hegemony in actual speech.
listen, I'm not, I heard that there were some screenplays that actually had that. I'm like, come on, man. Like, that's not, people don't
Oh
talk like
man.
that. People don't talk
No.
like that. And good, like, remember, we were just watching a really cool series last week. We binge watched it. It's called Easy,
Yes.
and it's 3 seasons on Netflix, right? And it's basically following it's basically like an anthology series, right? And each season follows a group of people in Chicago, right? And just like the various nature of their relationships. There's a married couple, there's a lesbian couple, that, open marriage, whatever. But one of the things that I loved about it was just the language and the dialogue. It felt so natural. And from what I read, I'm trying to remember who the director or the creator of the show was. He does a lot of improvisation with his actors. So sometimes those scenes, it's really them just speaking from the character's point of view. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying? And so it's like, okay, this is your character. You know who it is. Here's the scene. You guys are talking to each other. What would you say? You know what I mean? Oh, Joe Swanberg. And there's certain scenes, it just feels so natural. I'm like, this is how people talk to each other.
It did. It did.
Yeah. And I just wish that maybe some of that natural dialogue could come back to some black content, that we can have intelligent black characters, but also please stop making them sound like a fucking encyclopedia. Like, that's not, people don't talk like that. Like, people make fun of like Aaron Sorkin, right? Like, his characters talk super quick. And
Right.
people don't really talk like that, but we understand that it's an affect, right? Like, that's part of his directorial or his writing style, right? So and like I said, dialogue should be able to do whatever, but I just feel like with black content, I just feel like we have to let our characters be messy. We have to let them be problematic, right? So, like a scene like Insecure, like I remember from season 1 where Molly found out that the guy that she was dating had slept with another man, and then she was having issues with it, right? So you had Molly, who was
Right.
clearly biphobic, but there was a scene afterwards where she's with the girls, she's with Issa and Kelly and all the other ones, and they were pushing back. You know what I mean? So you got to have that balance. Like, okay, you can let Molly be
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
problematic, but also show the balance of other characters who may not be as problematic, to help her work it out and to help the audience help it out, because you need to give them two equal points of view. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm not here for these kind of block content creators. I don't want that shit. Send it back. Like, I want my content to be engaging. I want it to be fun. I want to cry. I want to laugh, and I want it to be fearless. I want black content creators to be fearless and not be afraid of, oh, I'm gonna, offend again, like I said, barring being homophobic or transphobic or whatever, but just let your characters be messy. Let them be flawed,
Right.
So, but yeah. But also say I loved 40-year-old version. I hope people love it as much as I do.
I agreed.
And I think that Radha is just, she's so much fun. Like, I can't wait to see what she comes up with next.
It's absolutely agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. This was just. I know that this was a culmination of years of work for her, going from stage show to YouTube series to now movie. So obviously she's got the chops. Writing for She's Got to Have It and Empire. So I know she's got more coming, but I'm really excited to hear more from what she's got coming from her perspective.
Right. Right. Alrighty. So that is our review of 40-year-old virgin and other things.
Yeah, and other things, lots of other things.
Thank you, Jerry, for
Of
joining.
course, no problem. I'm about to go watch The Boys, and
Oh my God.
and
Where's my liquor? I just, after last week's episode, I was like, why did I watch this sober? I should have
uh,
had an edible before that, because that
yeah, I was about to say I'm gonna need something a little stronger than liquor.
and it's the season
But
finale. So it's like,
is it? Oh snap!
yeah,
All right,
yeah.
let me go. Let me go get ready.
Thank you, listeners, for listening to another episode of the Spectrum Lounge. See you on the other side.